In the year 200 AC, if you walked through the halls of the Red Keep, you wouldn't have noticed Aegon Targaryen. He was the fourth son of Maekar, who was himself the fourth son of King Daeron II. In the world of Westeros, being a fourth son of a fourth son is a polite way of saying you are a ghost. You are a backup to a backup. Aegon's odds were effectively zero. He was so far down the line of succession that he wasn't even given the prince treatment. He was essentially invisible. Because of this invisibility, Aegon was allowed to do something no royal prince had done since the conquest. He left the castle. He left with a shaved head to hide his royal Valyrian hair and a simple wooden spoon tucked into his pack. He started going by the name Egg, a nickname that fit his bald head and his low status. He became a squire for a massive 7-foot-tall hedge knight named Sir Duncan the Tall. Dunk wasn't some high-born hero. He was just a guy from the gutters of Flea Bottom who happened to be massive and possessed a heart of pure gold. For years, Egg didn't live in palaces. He slept in haylofts, ate salty fish by campfires, and got his boots muddy in every corner of the Seven Kingdoms. While the other Targaryens were busy with court politics and secret Blackfire rebellions, Egg was seeing exactly how the High Lords treated the people they were supposed to protect. He saw that the common people were the true heart of the realm. He saw the cruelty of local lords who stole harvests and the quiet, desperate hunger of a Westeros that the king in King's Landing never bothered to visit. This journey changed him forever. He wanted to be a king who actually mattered to the people who didn't even have last names. Then, the world started to break. It's almost as if fate decided to clear the path for Egg by using a scythe to prune the family tree. It began at the tourney of Ashford. This was supposed to be a grand celebration of chivalry, but it turned into a nightmare that shifted the history of the world. The perfect Targaryen heir, Baelor Breakspear, the Hand of the King, and the man everyone assumed would be the greatest ruler since Jaehaerys the Conciliator, died in a freak accident during a trial by 7. He died protecting Dunk, the humble hedge knight. When Baelor's helmet was removed after the fight, his brains literally spilled out into the mud of the tourney grounds. The hope of the Targaryen dynasty died in that mud. It was the first domino in a sequence of tragedies that would eventually lead a boy with a wooden spoon to the throne. Soon after this, the Great Spring Sickness swept through Westeros. This was a plague so devastating, it makes modern pandemics look like a cold. It turned the streets of King's Landing into a literal graveyard, much like the peak of COVID, but with no doctors and no hope. The air was thick with the smell of death. It was so bad that the Hand of the King, Bloodraven, had to order the pyromancers to burn the mountains of bodies with wildfire inside the dragon pit because the gravediggers couldn't keep up. The sickness was a great equalizer. King Daeron the Good died in the Great Spring Sickness. This brutal plague also wiped out Baelor's sons, leaving the throne to Daeron's second son, Aerys I. Aerys was a bookish recluse who neglected his marriage and the realm, allowing the sorcerer Bloodraven to rule from the shadows. When Aerys died childless after a lackluster 12-year reign, the crown skipped his mad brother Rhaegal's line and passed to the fourth son, Maekar I. The stern warrior who accidentally killed Baelor finally became king, spending his reign trying to outrun the guilt of the past. Egg still wasn't next in line. He had 3 older brothers, and each of them represented a different way a Targaryen could fail. The eldest, Daeron, was a hopeless drunk. He was plagued by prophetic dragon dreams that showed him a future of fire and blood, and he drank himself into a stupor just to make the visions stop. He eventually died of a pox caught from a prostitute. The second brother, Aerys Brightflame, was a genuine psychopath. Aerys was the kind of person who would throw a cat into a forge just to hear the sound it made. He was cruel, arrogant, and believed he was a god. Aerys eventually died doing his usual brand of insanity. He drank a cup of wildfire, genuinely believing the magical substance would transform him into a living dragon. Instead of growing wings, he melted from the inside out in an agonizing display of hubris. The third brother, Aemon, was the smart one. He saw the madness of his family and wanted no part of the power struggle. He went to the Citadel to become a maester, giving up his rights to any titles or crowns. By 233 AC, King Maekar was dead. He died in a brutal, gritty way during the peak uprising. Lord Gorman Peake was a serial rebel who had backed the Blackfires, and Maekar went to crush him at his castle, Starpike. During the siege, as the king was leading his men toward the gates, a giant stone was hurled from the battlements. It crushed Maekar on the spot. Westeros was now in a full-blown succession crisis. There was no clear heir, and the shadow of the Blackfire pretenders was looming over the sea. The lords called a great council, a high-stakes meeting of every lord in the Seven Kingdoms, to decide who should lead. They were so desperate that they actually begged Aemon to leave the maesters and take the crown. They tried to tell him his vows didn't matter if the realm was at stake. But Aemon was a man of steel-clad honor. He refused. To make sure he could never be used as a political pawn against his younger brother, he boarded a ship and headed for the Wall to join the Night's Watch. That left Egg. The lords absolutely hated the idea of King Aegon V. They called him the Unlikely because he smelled of the stable and spent too much time talking to commoners and peasants. They were terrified that he would try to take away their power and give it to the people who actually tilled the fields. But they had no other choice. Aegon V was crowned, and the boy who squired for a hedge knight was now the most powerful man in the world. Aegon V sat on the Iron Throne with the best intentions of any king in history. He wanted justice. He immediately began passing laws that would give the peasants rights they had never dreamed of. He wanted to limit the ability of lords to tax their people into starvation, and he wanted to abolish the right of lords to beat or kill their small folk without consequence. He wanted a fair Westeros, where a wooden spoon was as respected as a silver fork. But the High Lords weren't going to take that sitting down. For 26 years, Aegon's reign was a constant, exhausting series of riots and mini-rebellions. The Lannisters, the Tyrells, and the Baratheons saw him as a traitor to his own class. They blocked his laws in court, ignored his decrees in the provinces, and waited for him to grow old and fail. Aegon realized a bitter truth, that being a good man wasn't enough to rule Westeros. You needed power. And in his family, power meant dragons. Aegon's own family made his life even harder. He wanted his children to marry for love, just as he had married his wife, Betha Blackwood. He didn't want them to be pawns in a political game. His eldest son, Duncan the Small, was betrothed to the daughter of Lord Lyonel Baratheon, known as the Laughing Storm. Lyonel was a massive, fierce warrior and the great-great-grandfather of Robert Baratheon. He loved the Targaryens, but he loved his pride more. When Duncan broke the betrothal to marry a mysterious commoner named Ginny of Oldstones, Lyonel went into a berserker rage. He ripped down the Targaryen banners, declared himself the Storm King, and started a bloody rebellion. Aegon, the king who hated war, had to send his best friend, Sir Duncan the Tall, to fight a duel against Lyonel. Dunk won, but the cost was a permanent scar on the relationship between the throne and the Stormlands. Then came the prophecy. A woods witch, the ghost of Highheart, came to court with Ginny of Oldstones. She told Aegon that the prince that was promised, the savior of the world, would be born from the line of his grandchildren, Aerys and Rhaella. Even though Aerys and Rhaella didn't love each other, Aegon forced them to marry. He was getting desperate. He realized that to force the lords to obey his kind laws, he needed the unkind power of dragons. He became obsessed, just like his brother Aerion had been. He spent the royal treasury on ancient, forbidden scrolls and fossilized dragon eggs. He thought that if he could just bring dragons back, he could finally force the world to be a better place. By 259 AC, Aegon was an old man whose patience had been burned away by 20 years of lordly resistance. He gathered his inner circle at his favorite vacation spot, the Palace of Summerhall. He brought 7 dragon eggs, one for each kingdom. He brought the most skilled pyromancers in the world, men who claimed they knew how to wake the stone with fire. This is where the story turns into a horror film. Aegon believed that a specific combination of fire and blood magic could hatch the eggs. He used wildfire, the most unstable magical napalm in existence. Some say the pyromancers messed up the ritual. Others say the ghost of Highheart's prophecy required a sacrifice that went wrong. The wildfire didn't hatch the eggs. It fed on the palace. The green flames of wildfire cannot be put out. They melt stone like wax. The beautiful, airy palace of Summerhall became a furnace in seconds. In the middle of this green hell, Sir Duncan the Tall showed why he was the greatest knight to ever live. As the roof collapsed, Dunk used his strength to hold up a burning ceiling with his bare hands, screaming for the others to run. He pulled the pregnant Rhaella out of the inferno, saving the future of the dynasty. But Dunk couldn't save everyone. King Aegon V, Prince Duncan the Small, and the Master of Revels all perished in the heat. The king died trying to play God with a substance he couldn't control. The most haunting part of the story is what was happening right outside the burning walls. As the palace screamed, Rhaella Targaryen gave birth on the grass, surrounded by the smell of burning stone and the ghosts of her family. She gave birth to Rhaegar Targaryen. This is the same Rhaegar who is assumed to be the father of Jon Snow, and Rhaegar was born in blood and ash. The dragon had finally returned, but it was a boy who would grow up melancholy and sad. Rhaegar felt more at home in the ruins of Summerhall than in the Red Keep. He would often go there alone with his harp to sleep where his grandfather died. Rhaegar believed that he was the prince who was promised growing up, the same belief that drove Aegon V to Summerhall, which eventually led him to Lyanna Stark. He believed he needed a third head for the dragon, so he fell for Lyanna, married her in secret, and sparked Robert's rebellion. That choice led to the death of the Targaryen family and the end of everything Aegon V had tried to build.